They will tell you that sacrifice is noble, that bending yourself for others is the highest virtue. They want you tired. They want you drained, because the person who always puts others first is predictable, pliable, easy to guilt, easy to use. They don't admire your generosity, they exploit it. And the most dangerous part, you let them. You call it love, you call it loyalty. But deep down, doesn't it feel more like slow erosion than devotion? How many times have you silenced your own needs to keep the peace? How often have you burned for people who wouldn't even light a match for you? This isn't compassion. This is self-betrayal in a mask, and it tears you apart from the inside out. Stoicism teaches us that the highest good is living in accordance with nature, and nature does not reward what weakens its foundation. Self-neglect is not a virtue. It is a fracture, and no structure can endure if its core is crumbling. In this video, we strip away the lies, the guilt, the conditioning, and we rebuild from within. If you're ready to reclaim your life, not through rage, but through reason, then please subscribe as a quiet commitment to yourself, a step toward sovereignty, toward stillness, toward the strength you were never meant to give away. Everything in life, whether a galaxy, a household, or a mind, revolves around a center. And if that center becomes unstable, everything orbiting it begins to unravel. You don't have to look far to see it. Think of the person who gives and gives, who says yes to every demand, who absorbs every crisis. Look a little closer, and you'll see what they rarely admit: resentment, fatigue, and the quiet collapse of someone who no longer recognizes themselves. The truth is, most people aren't falling apart because of one big blow. They crumble because they've neglected their own foundation for too long. Stoicism reminds us that clarity of mind and strength of soul aren't luxuries, they are duties. If you're not centered, you are reactive. If you are reactive, you're not living, you're being pushed. And when the world starts shaking, if you are not anchored in your own principles, emotions, and self-worth, then every demand, every opinion, every storm will carry you somewhere you didn't choose to go. You are the center of your reality, not in an arrogant sense, but in a structural one. If your mind is fragmented, your relationships suffer. If your energy is constantly pulled in 10 different directions, your vision gets blurry. You can't build anything meaningful when you're constantly rebuilding yourself. And yet, that's what so many people do. They live in fragments. Moments of peace interrupted by waves of guilt. Spurts of focus drowned by endless distractions. Attempts at self-care hijacked by the next emergency. That's not life. That's survival on a loop. A person who doesn't hold their own center isn't just weak, they're vulnerable to being shaped by the chaos around them. You start living on other people's timelines, fulfilling other people's expectations, solving other people's problems. And all the while, your inner compass gets quieter, your values blur, your boundaries dissolve. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology caught up. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That's not a motivational quote, it's an instruction. What you allow at your center will shape the orbit of your life. Holding your center means something deeper than setting boundaries or having a morning routine. It's a vow, a commitment to not betray yourself just to be accepted. It means recognizing that your peace is your responsibility, not a side effect of external conditions. You can't wait for the world to quiet down before you center yourself, because the world won't. There will always be someone who needs something, always some fire to put out, always a reason to abandon yourself just one more time. But eventually, you realize that putting yourself last doesn't make you noble. It makes you unstable. And instability, no matter how well-meaning, is dangerous. You cannot give from a foundation that's cracked. You cannot lead when you're lost in your own fog. And you cannot love, at least not well, if you're constantly abandoning yourself in the process. There's a difference between helping and being consumed, between support and surrender, between patience and self-erasure. The center must hold, and if you don't make that your priority, no one else will. Life doesn't reward you for overextending. It doesn't hand out medals for exhaustion. What it gives you are consequences. Fatigue that becomes bitterness, over-accommodation that becomes invisibility, emotional labor that becomes resentment. And once those seeds are planted, it's only a matter of time before they grow into quiet anger. At others, yes, but mostly at yourself. The person you see in the mirror every morning deserves more than that. They deserve protection, not from the world, but from the version of you that keeps putting them last. To center yourself isn't to shut the world out. It's to stop letting the world rearrange you. It's choosing clarity when confusion is easy. Choosing self-command when it's tempting to chase approval. It's the internal discipline of saying, I will not abandon myself today, no matter what happens. That's strength, that's stillness, that's sovereignty. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you ever become that person if your center is constantly shifting to accommodate everyone else? You can't. Not fully, and certainly not sustainably. The world doesn't need more people running on fumes. It doesn't need more martyrs. What it needs are individuals who are deeply anchored in themselves, people who respond instead of react, people who choose their values over their impulses, people who can stand in the storm and not be swept away by every gust of opinion, crisis, or need. You don't owe the world your collapse. You owe it your clarity. You don't owe people your constant availability. You owe them your grounded presence. And you can't offer either if you keep abandoning your center in the name of being good, liked, or needed. It's tempting to think that putting yourself first is selfish, that prioritizing your peace is a betrayal of those you care about. But it's the opposite. When your mind is clear, your love is stronger. When your values are intact, your actions are more intentional. When you operate from a place of stillness rather than scattered desperation, everything you give becomes more powerful. That's what the Stoics meant when they talked about living in accordance with nature. Your nature, your structure, your role. And nature does not thrive in disarray. It thrives through order, through flow, through design. You are not separate from that. You are that. So ask yourself truthfully, what is orbiting around your center right now? Is it built on guilt, fear, or chaos? Or is it built on principle, discipline, and clarity? Because whatever sits at your center, whether consciously chosen or unconsciously tolerated, will define the shape of your life. And the longer you ignore that center, the harder it becomes to recognize who you are beneath the noise. But you can change that, not with a dramatic shift, but with a steady return. A daily vow, I return to myself. I hold. I do not bend for approval. I do not break for acceptance. I hold. Seneca warned, if you do not know to which port you are sailing, no wind is favorable. Let that sink in. If your center is unstable, even opportunities become distractions. Even help becomes a crutch. Even love becomes a leash. Without direction, everything is noise. But with a solid center, even chaos becomes manageable. You respond instead of collapse. You move with purpose instead of panic. You create from order instead of react from lack. This isn't about being emotionless or cold. It's about being sovereign, self-governed, disciplined, not in denial, but in direction. The person who centers themselves becomes a force, calm, not because the world is quiet, but because they are, focused, not because there's nothing to distract, but because they've chosen what matters. That's not selfishness, that's wisdom. You were not born to scatter your soul across 1,000 emergencies. You were meant to be solid, steady, the still point in the turning world, the one who remembers what matters when everyone else forgets. And that starts not with action, but with anchoring. The center must hold. Let that be your starting point, not just today, but every day. Because everything else, your relationships, your work, your legacy, depends on it. Disappearance rarely arrives with a bang. It's quiet, subtle, unannounced. It begins in small, forgettable ways. The nod when you wanted to shake your head. The yes that barely escaped your lips when your chest screamed no. The silence you offered just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. You keep telling yourself it's nothing, it's just once, just this time, just to keep the peace. But those little fractures in your will, those tiny betrayals of your own voice, they don't just go away, they accumulate. You chip away at yourself one silent compromise at a time, until one day you look around and realize the life you're living feels foreign, like you're performing a role someone else wrote, like you're still breathing, but you're not really there. This is the slow disappearance, the erosion of self that doesn't show up as a crisis, but as numbness. You wake up and go through motions, not choices. You listen to people's needs, but forget how to name your own. You show up where you're needed, but can't remember the last time you were where you wanted to be. That's how self-neglect works. It doesn't take your life away, it makes you surrender it piece by piece. And no one around you sounds the alarm because to them, you still look functional. You still smile, still contribute, still meet expectations. But they're not the ones who notice what you lost. You are, and you feel it, not with panic, but with a dull, quiet ache that grows heavier the longer you ignore it. Most people don't vanish because the world erases them. They vanish because they step out of their own frame. They let other voices speak louder than their own. They mistake self-sacrifice for love, over-accommodation for virtue, and people-pleasing for peace. But what you bury doesn't disappear. It waits. And the longer you wait to return to yourself, the harder it becomes to find what you abandoned. The truth is, people don't need your disappearance to love you. If they do, it was never love. It was convenience. Stoic philosophy teaches us to align our actions with reason and virtue, but that alignment cannot happen when you treat your own needs as disposable. What is reasonable about betraying your own integrity for temporary harmony? What is virtuous about becoming invisible in your own story? It's a strange kind of grief, to miss yourself while still being alive. But that's what happens when you no longer feel rooted in your choices. When every decision is shaped by external demand rather than internal clarity. You may still be doing things, working, helping, fixing, but it's different. It's not creation, it's containment, not contribution, but compensation. You feel the weight of everyone else's expectations pressing against a self that hasn't had space to breathe in months, maybe years. And eventually, that self gets quieter. Not because it's weak, but because you stopped listening. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not because the self is so dark, but because it requires full presence. And full presence doesn't allow for constant escape. To truly accept yourself, you must first acknowledge how far you've drifted. How many times you told yourself, 'I'll come back to me later,' and how often later never came. It's easier to give than to reflect. Easier to serve others than to sit in the discomfort of unmet desires and unexplored dreams. But avoidance is not peace. And giving your life to others without giving yourself a home inside it first is not love. It's exile. You were not meant to fade. Not meant to live behind the curtain while others take center stage in your time, your choices, your energy. And you don't reclaim yourself by screaming to be seen. You reclaim yourself by noticing, Noticing when you're shrinking instead of standing. Noticing when you're editing your truth for the comfort of others. Noticing when your presence feels performative instead of genuine. These moments are not failures, they're signals. Signals that it's time to return. There's a quiet strength in choosing yourself again. Not loudly, not defensively, just clearly. A slow return to honesty, to boundaries, to speaking, even when your voice shakes, to choosing your pace, even when the world rushes you, to honoring the small things, rest, solitude, reflection, because you finally remember that your value isn't in how much you give, but in how fully you exist. Epictetus reminded us, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. But how can you adorn a self you haven't met in months? How can you stand tall in a structure you've allowed others to redesign? This isn't about pushing people away. It's about returning to the one person you'll live with every second of your life, yourself. That relationship between you and your mind, you and your body, you and your breath, is the most sacred and the most often neglected. You show up for birthdays, for deadlines, for favors. But how often do you show up for your own discomfort without turning it off? How often do you ask yourself what you truly need and wait for the honest answer? Without distraction, without guilt, without the impulse to fix, perform, or please. You don't need a full reinvention to return. You just need one choice at a time, one boundary restored, 1 hour protected, one truth spoken. That's how the reappearance begins. That's how the self returns from exile, not with fanfare, but with alignment. Slowly, the fog starts to lift. You notice your breath again. Your decisions feel deliberate. You start to recognize the sound of your own mind, unfiltered, not shaped by what others want to hear. That's when you realize you never really disappeared. You were just buried beneath the noise. Seneca wrote, "No person hands out their money to passers-by, but to how many do each of us hand out our lives?" You owe it to yourself to stop handing away your hours, your energy, your essence like it's spare change. Your life is not loose currency for anyone's agenda. It's sacred territory, and it deserves your presence, not just in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones, in how you choose to spend your afternoon, in how you speak to yourself before bed, in how you carry your soul through the small, ordinary moments that no one claps for. You're not weak because you've drifted. You're human. It happens. What matters now is not guilt, but clarity, not regret, but return. The most courageous thing you can do in a world that rewards distraction is to come home to yourself, to stop looking outward for permission and start listening inward for direction. The voice inside you may be faint, but it hasn't disappeared. And every time you honor it, you get louder, not in volume, but in presence. So this is your quiet reminder. You're still here. You haven't been erased. You've just been away. But the return is always available, and it starts with the simplest, most radical act of all, choosing not to vanish anymore, choosing to stay, choosing to be, choosing to matter to yourself again. The world might not notice the difference at first, but you will, and in time they'll feel it too, not because you demand it, but because your presence becomes undeniable. That's how reappearance begins, and that's how it stays. Strength doesn't just show up one day and decide to stay. It's not something you inherit, and it's not something you luck into. It's built, slowly, deliberately, and constantly. The illusion most people fall into is thinking that once they reach a certain level of mental clarity, emotional resilience, or physical health, they can relax, that somehow the work is over. But strength is not a destination. It's a discipline, a muscle. And if you stop using it, if you stop feeding it, if you stop respecting it, it doesn't stay. It fades, not loudly, but gradually. A little less focus here, a little less intention there. Until one day, the clarity you once had feels distant. The stability you once lived in starts to shake. There's a quiet cost to neglecting what grounds you. When you don't maintain your internal structure, you slowly become reactive. Life doesn't stop just because you did. The challenges, the stress, the noise, they continue. And if you're not anchored, you start slipping. You find yourself more easily overwhelmed, more easily distracted, more easily controlled. That's the part no one tells you. If you don't maintain your strength, someone or something else will shape your weakness. And the more you outsource your stability, the more fragile your life becomes. You might not feel it at first. You might even convince yourself everything's fine. But under the surface, your foundation is thinning. And it only takes one storm to find out how hollow your shelter has become. Discipline is what builds the structure you live in. It's the invisible architecture that supports everything else. When you eat well, train your body, guard your time, and think deeply, you're not just doing self-care. You're protecting your capacity. You're keeping the engine alive. Because life will make demands of you whether you're ready or not. And if you don't have something solid to meet those demands, you'll collapse under the weight of what should have been manageable. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly. Strength is not something you practice only when things are falling apart. It's what you build so that they don't." There's a reason the Stoics emphasized preparation. Because they understood that adversity isn't a possibility, it's a guarantee. And when it arrives, you won't have time to build your armor. You either show up ready or you don't. The people who appear unshakable in times of crisis didn't get lucky. They practiced. They practiced discipline on the days they didn't feel like it. They practiced reflection when distraction was more tempting. They practiced silence in a world that profits off noise. Strength is not built during applause. It's built in solitude, in the hours no one sees, in the habits no one praises. That's where you find out who you're becoming, and that's what decides how well you'll hold when the pressure comes. People often confuse strength with intensity, as if being fired up for a few weeks or months is enough to carry them through life. But strength isn't built on emotion. It's built on repetition, on showing up, not in grand gestures, but in the ordinary, unglamorous discipline of consistency. Your health doesn't maintain itself because you exercised once. Your focus doesn't remain sharp because you meditated last week. Your emotional control doesn't stick because you journaled during a hard time. These are practices, not events. And if they don't stay alive in your routine, they die in your reality. It's easy to want to be strong. It's much harder to commit to the systems that make you strong. That means saying no when it's inconvenient, choosing solitude when the noise is loud, resisting comfort when it's calling your name. It means walking into your morning not with chaos, but with intention, knowing that every small discipline, what you eat, how you speak to yourself, how you respond to conflict, is shaping the version of you that will face tomorrow. The future isn't just coming. You're building it, one choice at a time. And the structure you walk into 5 years from now will be made from what you did today, especially when no one was watching. Carl Jung wrote, "What you do not make conscious will rule you, and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. If you don't consciously maintain your internal order, you will be at the mercy of chaos disguised as coincidence. You'll look at your life and call it bad luck or timing, when in truth, you simply didn't reinforce your foundation when you had the chance. Strength isn't about control, it's about consciousness, about knowing where your edges are and choosing to reinforce them rather than ignore them. That kind of strength can't be faked, and it can't be rushed. When you take yourself seriously, everything changes. You begin to see that your time is not disposable. Your energy is not renewable without care. Your attention is not something to hand out freely, and when you treat these things as sacred, the world begins to adjust. Not always kindly, but it adjusts. People start to recognize your limits. Your presence becomes more grounded, your voice more stable. That's the outcome of maintenance. It's not about becoming rigid, it's about becoming reliable. You become someone others can trust, not because you're always agreeable, but because you're consistent, clear, solid. Seneca reminded us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And most of what we waste isn't lost in distraction, it's lost in repair, in constantly fixing what we let fall apart, in always trying to catch up because we didn't stay ready. Maintenance may seem tedious, but crisis is even more demanding. Choose your effort wisely. You will either invest in keeping your strength or pay the price for abandoning it. One is uncomfortable by design, the other is painful by consequence. What's remarkable is how much stability you can build with just a few daily non-negotiables. A walk, a pause before speaking, 10 minutes of quiet reflection, a deliberate breath before reacting. These are not signs of weakness, they are signs of command. The person who integrates discipline into their daily life doesn't need to scream their strength. It's felt in how they move, how they choose, how they hold their ground when others rush to please. That's the strength you build, not to dominate, but to remain unmoved when the world around you is shifting. You don't have to do everything, but you do have to do what sustains you. Because if you don't, if you let the foundation crack, don't be shocked when everything starts to slip. You can't be surprised by fatigue when you ignore sleep. You can't be surprised by anxiety when your mind is a dumping ground for noise. You can't be surprised by weakness when you haven't trained your will. Life gives back what you put in, not immediately, but inevitably. And when it feels hard, when the structure is heavy and the effort feels invisible, remember why you started. You didn't commit to discipline because it was easy. You committed because you wanted to be free. Free from chaos, free from weakness, free from being tossed by every demand, every emotion, every setback. You maintain your strength so you don't collapse in moments that matter. You do the work now so you don't have to rebuild later. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." That victory doesn't happen once. It happens every morning you get up and choose structure over entropy, peace over indulgence, purpose over drift. So don't wait for collapse to remind you of what you should have protected. Guard your mind, move your body, feed your clarity, respect your rhythm. These are not trends, they are tools. And when used with consistency, they do more than build strength. They build the kind of life that holds, no matter what comes. Strength demands maintenance, and maintenance is love disguised as discipline. You either care enough to preserve yourself, or you surrender to slow erosion. And if you're listening to this, you already know which path you were meant to walk. Choose it again, today, and every day after. It's rarely the big explosions that drain you. It's the tiny leaks. The moments where you explain yourself 3 more times than you needed to. The times you said yes with a forced smile when everything in you begged for a no. The reflexive apologies that slipped out even though you did nothing wrong. These aren't just habits, they're energy drains. Every small compromise in your emotional boundaries doesn't just take a piece of your peace, it chips away at your presence. And over time, that adds up to something heavy, something that makes you feel like you're carrying everyone else's weight while slowly forgetting how to stand tall in your own. It's not always easy to see it happening. You might think you're just being kind, accommodating, cooperative, but underneath that smile is fatigue. Quiet, constant fatigue. Not the kind that sleep can fix, but the kind that comes from giving too much of yourself away without ever returning home to refill. You feel stretched thin, unnoticed, resentful. And that resentment grows in the places where your boundaries used to be. That's the cost of emotional leakage. It doesn't just deplete your mood, it weakens your clarity. And when clarity goes, confusion walks in and starts making your choices for you. Stoic philosophy has always taught that guarding your inner world is the foundation of peace. Because once someone gains control of your emotions, they control you, not with force, but with guilt, with manipulation, with expectation, and you begin to shape your behavior around other people's reactions. You tiptoe, you edit your truth, you seek approval in the very places that continue to drain you. And it's subtle. You don't even realize how much you're being pulled until you find yourself mentally rehearsing conversations, walking on eggshells, shrinking your expression just to keep things smooth. But smooth for who? And at what cost? Emotional energy is like a currency, and most people are overspending. You give it away in arguments you should have walked past, in situations you should have exited, in silence you should have broken. Not all emotional expression is harmful, but unguarded, constant expression without discernment, that's exhaustion disguised as connection, and that's what wears you down the most. You don't need to give every reaction a voice. You don't need to validate every feeling someone else projects onto you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stay calm, not because you're suppressing, but because you're choosing not to bleed for what doesn't deserve a wound. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But that understanding can only happen when you stop giving all your emotional power away, when you pause before reacting, when you let space enter between the stimulus and your response. That space is where clarity lives. It's where you remember that not every comment needs a defense, that not every question deserves an answer, that not every frown is your responsibility to fix. You begin to reclaim your emotional sovereignty, not by closing off, but by filtering what actually requires your energy. There's something dignified about restraint, not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from wisdom. The person who leaks emotions at every turn might appear expressive, but beneath that expression often lies instability. When your emotions are always on display, you become predictable, and predictability in the wrong hands makes you manipulable. The Stoics taught us that a wise person is not cold, they are composed. They feel everything, but they don't let everything move them. That's the difference between reacting and responding. One is unconscious, the other is disciplined. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming deliberate, knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, when to feel fully, and when to pull back and observe. You don't need to put on armor made of indifference. You need to build a filter of self-respect. One that asks, is this worth my energy? Is this drawing me closer to the life I want, or pulling me further from it? Is this conversation deepening connection or draining my clarity? When you start asking those questions, something shifts. You begin to preserve yourself, not out of defensiveness, but out of alignment. Seneca reminded us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and many of our emotional leaks stem from imagined responsibilities, from beliefs that we owe everyone an explanation, that we must be understood by all, that our value is tied to how agreeable we are. But those beliefs are lies dressed as virtue. You don't owe your energy to everyone who demands it. You don't owe your time to everyone who asks for it. You don't owe your attention to everything that flashes across your screen, across your day, across your mind. What you owe, deeply, unapologetically, is stewardship of your inner world. That is your sacred space, and no one should be allowed to rearrange it unless they've earned that right with presence, respect, and reciprocity. People will adjust to the emotional tone you set. If you're always available, always reacting, always explaining, they will expect that version of you forever. But the moment you start conserving your energy, the moment you begin to say, "not now," or simply remain silent, the balance shifts. They may resist it at first, but eventually they will recalibrate, or they will leave. And if they leave because you stopped leaking, then let them. That's not rejection, that's refinement. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, but knowing yourself is useless if you don't also protect yourself." Emotional boundaries are not just about others. They are about you learning to live with your own depth without letting it drown you. It means feeling everything but being mastered by nothing. It means walking through your day with a calm center that no one else can access unless you invite them in. It means reclaiming the right to decide what deserves your emotional investment. You don't have to be aggressive to be firm. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one that feels no need to react, the one that knows when to engage and when to let the noise pass. That's not weakness, that's authority. And that authority is not given by the world. It's claimed by the one who stops leaking. Your strength is not in how much you feel, it's in how you manage what you feel. And if you let every disappointment, every comment, every misunderstanding occupy space inside you, you will eventually run out of room for peace. The human spirit is not limitless in capacity. It must be prioritized, pruned, protected. You can't grow in a garden where every weed is allowed to thrive. You must be intentional, not harsh, not closed, just conscious. So the next time you feel the pull to explain what needs no defense, pause. The next time you feel guilty for drawing a boundary, breathe through it. The next time someone projects their chaos onto you, return to your center. You are not obligated to hold what isn't yours, and you are not a vessel for everyone else's storms. What you are is a steward of energy, of clarity, of self. Let others call it distance if they must. Let them misunderstand your silence. Let them confuse your calm for indifference. You are not here to be decoded by everyone. You are here to be whole, and wholeness begins the moment you stop bleeding for things that never deserve to touch you. Emotional leaks cost more than you realize, but the moment you decide to stop them, you begin to restore something even more valuable: your presence, your power, your peace. And nothing is more worthy of protection than that. There's a quiet lie that many of us believe. It's the idea that giving everything we have to others makes us virtuous. We think, if I just keep giving, if I just keep showing up, I'll be seen as good, as selfless. But when we look a little closer, we realize that it's not always generosity at play. Sometimes what we call selflessness is really an unconscious desire to be needed. The truth is, when you give without boundaries, you're not simply being compassionate, you're trying to prove your worth. And in that process, you lose yourself. There's a difference between giving because you can and giving because you feel you must. The former comes from a place of abundance, where your own needs are met and you have more to offer. The latter comes from a place of lack, where you pour out every last drop of yourself because you're afraid that if you stop, you won't matter. You're not offering love. You're offering your survival, hoping someone will fill the empty space you've created in yourself. But that's not kindness. It's a kind of emotional manipulation. You convince yourself that by giving, you'll get the approval, the recognition, the validation you crave. But in truth, you're just holding up a mirror to your own insecurity, and that's where overgiving starts to twist. Think about it. How often do you find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do? Saying yes when your body says no? How many times have you gone out of your way to make someone else's life easier, only to feel drained and unnoticed afterward. This is the hidden cost of overgiving. It doesn't just deplete your energy, it strips away your clarity, your voice, your sense of self. You end up serving others at the expense of your own well-being, and when the dust settles, you realize you've neglected the most important relationship in your life, the one with yourself. Giving without boundaries isn't virtue, it's survival, and it's a survival that asks you to die a little more each time you give. True service comes from overflow, not depletion. When you're full, you can give freely because you have enough to share. You aren't sacrificing a part of yourself to do it. You're choosing to share what you already have. But if you're constantly bleeding to make others comfortable, you're not helping them. You're letting them define you. You're saying, "I'm not enough as I am, but maybe if I give enough, I'll finally prove my worth." But no amount of giving will ever make you feel whole if the foundation of your generosity is built on insecurity. It's like trying to fill a cup that has a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour into it, it will never stay full. And no matter how much you give, you will always feel empty. There's a deep denial in overgiving. It's a denial of your own needs, your own worth, and ultimately, your own humanity. You become so focused on filling the gaps in others' lives that you forget to tend to your own. You convince yourself that you're noble for enduring the exhaustion, for taking on the burdens of others. But the truth is, you're denying yourself the right to be nourished. You're denying yourself the right to rest, to heal, to reclaim your energy. And in doing so, you're eroding the very foundation of your strength. When you give until you're empty, you're not serving others. You're sacrificing yourself. And that's a dangerous game to play. It's not that giving is wrong. Far from it. The world needs more kindness, more support, more people who are willing to show up for others. But true giving comes from a place of strength, not depletion. When you give from your own abundance, you empower both yourself and others. But when you give from a place of neediness, you feed the cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. You may temporarily win people's admiration, but you lose your own sense of self-respect in the process. You're not a martyr, you're a vessel, one that can only serve as long as it remains full. And if you're constantly draining yourself, you won't have anything left to offer. But how can you become who you truly are if you're constantly bending yourself to please others? How can you step into your power if you're always giving it away? Overgiving isn't generosity. It's a refusal to acknowledge your own value. It's pretending that your worth is tied to what you do for others instead of who you are. The truth is, you are enough as you are. You don't need to prove your worth through endless sacrifice. You don't need to disappear into someone else's version of your life. True strength comes from the ability to give freely without losing yourself in the process. And that's something only you can cultivate. It's time to stop confusing self-sacrifice with virtue. It's time to stop pretending that the more you give, the more valuable you become. Your value is inherent, not earned through exhaustion. And the more you realize that, the less you'll feel the need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to bend over backward for others to see your worth. You simply need to stand tall, to hold your own space, and to choose when and how to give based on your own capacity, not out of obligation. Giving should come from a place of strength, not emptiness. It should be a choice, not a compulsion. When you stop overgiving, something incredible happens. You start to feel more whole, more present, more in tune with your own needs. You begin to recognize that your worth isn't in how much you sacrifice, it's in how much you respect yourself. And as you cultivate that respect, you'll find that your relationships grow deeper, not because you're giving more, but because you're showing up as your full self. The people who truly care about you will appreciate your presence, your energy, and your boundaries. They will respect you more when you respect yourself. and those who don't will naturally fall away, leaving you space to nurture the connections that actually feed you. Overgiving is a hidden form of pride because it says, "I will sacrifice myself to prove that I matter." But true service, true love, true strength comes from a place of abundance, not depletion. It comes from recognizing that your worth is not in what you give, but in who you are. And when you can stand in that truth, you'll find that the world doesn't need your sacrifice, it needs your strength. And that strength is rooted in honoring yourself first, not out of selfishness, but out of the deep, unwavering knowledge that you are enough as you are. And when you remember that, you'll have more than enough to give. We often hear the phrase, "The world is a reflection of what's inside us," but the reality is that the world doesn't always respond to who you are. It responds to how you treat yourself. Every interaction, every exchange, every relationship reflects something about your own self-worth. If you treat yourself as a secondary priority, others will too. If you consistently delay your own dreams to accommodate others, they won't suddenly start pushing you to chase those dreams. In fact, they'll likely take it as a sign that your dreams aren't as important as theirs. And that, my friend, is where things start to go wrong. When you diminish your own needs and desires for the sake of everyone else, you teach the world that your boundaries aren't strong enough to be respected. You teach people that you don't value yourself, and as a result, they won't either. At its core, the world doesn't value what you don't value. That's a tough pill to swallow. We like to think that people will see our worth, despite how we treat ourselves, that somehow they'll recognize our potential even when we don't honor it. But life doesn't work that way. We don't get what we deserve. We get what we tolerate. And every time you settle for less than what you truly want, you reinforce that belief. You teach people that your time, your energy, and your spirit are all negotiable. It's easy to point fingers at others for not treating us the way we deserve, but the real question is, how have we taught them to treat us? Take a moment and think about it. When was the last time you said yes when you meant no? When was the last time you put someone else's comfort ahead of your own well-being? That's not kindness, it's self-neglect. And the world notices. It's not that people are intentionally disrespecting you, it's that they've picked up on the fact that you don't respect yourself enough to draw clear lines. And when those boundaries aren't drawn, when the standards aren't set, others will come in and take what they can without a second thought. You can't blame them for it. They're simply responding to the message you've sent. You've shown them that your needs are secondary, that your dreams can wait, and in turn, they've accepted that. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." This quote cuts right to the heart of the matter. It's easy to say we value ourselves, to speak words of self-respect, but the real measure of self-worth is in the actions we take. It's in the boundaries we set, the time we protect, the priorities we declare. And just like the universe responds to our actions, so do the people around us. If you act like your time isn't valuable, people will treat it like it's disposable. If you act like your dreams are negotiable, others will assume they don't matter. The harsh truth is that the way the world treats you is often a direct reflection of how you've taught it to treat you. This isn't to say that everyone will be intentionally malicious. Most of the time, it's not a conscious decision to take advantage of you. It's simply that when you don't set the standard for how you want to be treated, others will fill in that space. And unfortunately, not everyone is going to step up and treat you with the respect you deserve if you don't show them that you're worthy of it. It's not enough to expect others to respect you because of your potential or because you've quietly earned their admiration. The world doesn't read minds, it reads actions. And the way you present yourself, the way you honor your own needs and values, speaks louder than any words ever could. This is where the concept of self-respect becomes so vital. Self-respect isn't just about taking care of your body or maintaining a healthy routine. It's about recognizing your worth in every aspect of your life. It's about standing firm in your decisions, defending your time, and protecting your energy. When you show the world that you won't tolerate mistreatment or neglect, you teach others that your presence matters. You give them a blueprint for how they should treat you. And that blueprint is something you lay out through your daily choices. Do you stand up for your boundaries? Do you honor your own desires, or do you put them off for someone else's convenience? You might wonder how to begin this shift. How do you move from a place of self-neglect to a place where your needs come first, where the world starts reflecting your value back at you? The answer lies in small, consistent actions. It starts with you. It starts with the little moments, saying no when you mean it, drawing the line when you feel your boundaries being tested, refusing to tolerate disrespect, no matter how subtle. It's in how you treat yourself when no one is looking. The more you show up for your own needs, the more others will begin to show up for them too. People cannot respect what you don't respect. They cannot value what you don't value. And most importantly, they cannot give you the energy you've been withholding from yourself. We've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, and it sounds cliché, but the truth is, it's spot on. When you don't prioritize yourself, when you don't fill your own cup, it becomes impossible to give from a place of abundance. You give because you feel obligated, not because you have the capacity to do so. And when that happens, you don't give love, you give exhaustion, you give resentment, and you give it at the cost of your own well-being. You teach the world that your energy is endless, when in reality, it's finite. And once that well runs dry, it's too late to fill it again. It's time to stop waiting for the world to validate your worth. The world isn't in charge of your value. You are. You are the one who gets to decide how you're treated, how you're regarded, and how you show up for yourself. The way you treat yourself is the foundation for everything that follows. If you treat yourself as essential, the world will follow suit. If you treat yourself as optional, the world will see you as just that, an afterthought. As you begin to honor your own needs, you'll start to notice something incredible happen. Not only do you feel more aligned, more grounded, but you also become more magnetic. The energy you radiate when you truly value yourself draws the right people toward you, people who respect your boundaries, people who see your worth, and people who encourage you to chase your dreams. This shift doesn't just change how others treat you, it transforms how you show up for yourself. And that's where everything begins. You stop seeking validation from the world, and instead, you start creating the life you've always wanted, built on the solid foundation of self-respect and true value. Remember, the world reflects how you treat yourself. And the first step to changing the reflection is changing how you see yourself. Stop settling. Start respecting yourself, and watch as the world starts to respond to the energy you give it. You teach people how to treat you, not with your words, but with your actions. You set the tone, you draw the lines, and you show the world exactly how much you matter. Boundaries often get a bad rap. People hear the word and think of walls, tall, cold, impassable structures designed to keep others out. But that's not what boundaries are. Boundaries aren't about blocking people or shutting them out. They're about setting clear spaces where you control what's allowed in. Imagine a door instead of a wall, a door that you open when it's right for you and close when it's not. It's not about keeping people away. It's about letting them in on your terms. It's about deciding who deserves your time, your attention, your energy. Because let's face it, you can't give everything to everyone. And the truth is, you shouldn't. In a world that constantly demands more, It can feel like you're supposed to be available to anyone and everyone at all times. But if you're always saying yes to other people's needs, when do you ever get to say yes to your own? Boundaries aren't walls. They're the healthy lines that allow you to protect the parts of you that are most sacred. Your peace, your energy, your creativity. These parts of you take time to build, and if neglected, they can take a long time to heal. When you don't have boundaries, you're essentially leaving your door wide open, letting anyone walk in, take what they need, and leave you depleted. And when you're drained, you have nothing left to give, not to yourself and not to others. There's a misconception that having boundaries makes you rude or selfish, that somehow if you don't give everything of yourself, you're failing to love or connect with people. But that's not love. That's surrender. Surrendering your time, your values, your mental space, and ultimately, your self-respect. You see, love isn't about endlessly giving until you have nothing left. Love is about understanding that you must first protect yourself in order to truly give. Just like a cup can only overflow with what it holds, your ability to give love, kindness, or support comes from the wellspring of your own well-being. And that wellspring needs protection. Without boundaries, you slowly drain yourself, and eventually you have nothing left to give, no matter how much you want to. It's important to understand that boundaries don't just protect your physical space, they protect your emotional space as well. Your thoughts, your feelings, your needs are just as deserving of respect. When you allow others to cross your emotional boundaries, you're allowing them to impose their needs and their emotions on yours. They begin to dictate your state of mind, your happiness, and your peace. That's not freedom, that's control. Setting boundaries means protecting your emotional sovereignty. It's not about closing yourself off, but about being selective about who and what gets to enter. And not everyone deserves access to the most vulnerable parts of you. Boundaries are your way of saying, I respect myself enough to decide who gets to share my energy. This is not about being rigid. Boundaries are not about rejecting people or shutting them out completely. They're about creating space for healthy, intentional relationships. They're about understanding that your time and your energy are valuable, and you get to decide how and when to share them. When you set boundaries, you're not just protecting yourself, you're also respecting the other person. You're teaching them how to treat you. You're saying, I am worthy of respect, and I am choosing where my energy goes. This is empowering. It shows others that you value yourself, and they should too. When you constantly give without boundaries, you teach people that you're always available, that you have endless energy, that your time doesn't matter. But when you have boundaries, you show them that your time and energy are precious, and you won't give them away without careful consideration. But how can you become who you truly are if you're always giving away pieces of yourself to others? How can you stand in your truth if you're constantly bending to accommodate the needs of others? Boundaries are the key to self-discovery because they allow you to create the space necessary to reflect, to grow, and to become. Without boundaries, you're constantly reshaping yourself to fit other people's expectations, and that's a recipe for living a life that isn't yours. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love and self-respect. It's about deciding that you deserve to be treated with care, and that includes protecting your own time, energy, and mental health. When you don't have boundaries, you let the world dictate the rhythm of your life. People ask for your time, your attention, your help, and you give without thinking. But when you say no, when you decide to protect your space, you start taking control of your life again. You start putting yourself first, not because you don't care about others, but because you know that without your well-being intact, you have nothing to offer. That's the strength of boundaries. They give you the power to show up as your best self, not just as a person who's worn out from meeting everyone else's needs. The truth is, the more you allow others to infringe on your boundaries, the more you lose yourself. You start to feel resentful, drained, overwhelmed, and eventually you become disconnected from the person you truly are. When you set clear boundaries, you reconnect with yourself. You remember who you are, what you value, and where you stand. You start to operate from a place of strength and clarity, rather than from a place of guilt and depletion. Your boundaries don't just protect you, they help you reclaim your life. Remember, boundaries are not walls, they're doors. They open when you choose. They close when you choose. They allow you to connect with others on your terms, not theirs. And in a world that's constantly pushing for more, for faster, for better, the ability to say no and to protect your time, your peace, and your energy is an act of power. It's not about shutting people out. It's about choosing who deserves to enter. It's about being aligned with your true self and making sure your relationships reflect that alignment. When you start protecting yourself, you'll find that the world respects you more, not less. And that's when you start to live life on your own terms, when you begin to understand that boundaries are not limitations, but liberations. Your boundaries are your birthright. They are the lines you draw to safeguard your peace, to protect your energy, and to ensure that you can give in a way that is healthy and sustainable. You are allowed to decide who gets access to your time, your attention, and your space. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. Don't let anyone convince you that saying no is rude. Boundaries are a reflection of self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships. When you set boundaries, you're teaching others how to treat you, and you're teaching yourself how to protect what matters most. Letting everyone in isn't love, it's surrender. Love doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself at the altar of others' needs. Love is built on respect, respect for yourself and respect for others. When you set boundaries, you're not just protecting your own peace, you're showing others that they too deserve to be in relationships that honor their boundaries. And that, my friend, is the key to building stronger, more meaningful connections. When you learn to guard your space, you make room for what truly matters, and that's where the magic happens. If someone were to watch how you spent every hour this week, what would they say about your priorities? Would they see you investing in what truly matters? Or would they notice that your time is spent on distractions, obligations, and the demands of others? Time doesn't lie. It's the clearest mirror of your values. How you spend your minutes and hours tells the world exactly where your focus lies, whether it's on growth, on relationships, or on the things that feed your purpose, or whether it's scattered across 1,000 things that leave you feeling empty by the end of the day. The truth is, if you don't guard your time like it's sacred, don't expect your life to feel meaningful. When you don't take ownership of your time, it starts slipping away from you piece by piece, and before you know it, the years have passed, and you've been running on autopilot, living by the expectations of others, with little room left for what truly serves you. Every minute you give away thoughtlessly is a brick removed from the structure of your purpose. Your time is the foundation of everything you build. If you're not intentional with it, the things that truly matter to you, the passions, the dreams, the relationships, start to crumble. You may tell yourself that you're too busy to focus on what's important, but the truth is, you're too distracted. It's easy to get caught up in the cycle of endless tasks, emails, meetings, and obligations. But when you look back, how many of those things truly added value to your life? How many of them were just noise, things that demanded your attention but left you feeling drained, uninspired, and unfulfilled? The harsh reality is, you can't create a meaningful life if you keep giving away your time to things that don't align with your values. Your time is precious, and every moment spent on things that don't serve your true purpose is a moment you'll never get back. You can't just hope that one day you'll wake up and find your purpose. It's something you must carve out every single day by choosing where you place your focus and energy. This doesn't mean ignoring the responsibilities of life, but it does mean recognizing that those responsibilities should be balanced with your deeper goals. When you spend your time intentionally, when you give your energy to what truly matters, that's when you begin to build something meaningful. When you choose where your attention goes, you start constructing the life you want to live, not the one that others expect from you. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This quote speaks directly to the importance of self-awareness in how we spend our time. You can't expect to build a life that aligns with your values if you don't first take the time to look inward and ask yourself what truly matters. If you don't make space to reflect on your priorities and align your daily actions with them, you will always be at the mercy of outside distractions. And the world is full of them. Society, work, and even relationships can demand more of your time than you're willing to give. If you're not intentional about where your time goes, you'll find that you're giving away pieces of yourself to things that never truly nurture you. Think about the people, the activities, and the goals that you devote your time to. Who are the people you respond to first? What are the things that occupy your thoughts the most? How much of your time is spent on things that are important to you versus things that are simply there, filling space? This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. It's about taking a step back and evaluating where your energy is going. Every minute you spend on something that doesn't serve your purpose is a minute you can't get back. Time isn't just something we spend, it's something we invest. When you invest in your growth, in your passions, and in the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, you're creating a life that reflects your deepest values. When you spend it mindlessly, you're letting life slip through your fingers. The concept of time is something that we all know is fleeting, yet it's so easy to treat it like we have an unlimited supply. We say things like, "I'll get to that later," or "I don't have time right now." But the truth is, we all have time. We just choose where to spend it. And those choices matter more than we realize. Every time you put something off, you're making a choice. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with your values, you're making a choice. And those choices, though small in the moment, compound over time. They create patterns. They define your life. You are the sum of how you spend your time. You are not just the sum of your work, your relationships, or your dreams. You are also the sum of how you choose to use the time you're given. It's not that we don't have time. It's that we don't use it wisely. We get distracted by short-term gratification, by things that seem urgent but aren't truly important, and in doing so, we waste the most precious resource we have, our time. You might tell yourself that you'll make up for it later, but the truth is, later is a promise you'll never get back. Every time you give away your time thoughtlessly, you're saying no to the life you truly want to create. You're choosing comfort, distraction, and convenience over intentionality and growth. And those small choices, over time, add up. The good news is, you can change this at any moment. It starts with being conscious of where your time is going and making intentional choices. You can start by setting clear priorities, things that truly matter to you, things that align with your deeper purpose, and then start guarding those priorities fiercely. Say no when you need to. Choose your commitments wisely. Align your daily actions with the life you want to create. And remember, every minute you invest in your purpose is a step closer to the life you truly desire. Time isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. And once you start treating it with the respect it deserves, you'll find that life becomes more meaningful, more aligned, and more fulfilling. If you want to live a life that truly reflects your values, then start with your time. How you spend your time reveals everything about who you are and what you care about. Every decision you make, no matter how small, compounds into the reality you live in. Time doesn't lie. It tells the truth about your priorities, your focus, and your values. So take a moment to reflect. Where is your time going? And more importantly, where do you want it to go? Make the choice to invest in yourself. Choose your purpose, choose your growth, and watch as your life shifts to reflect those decisions. In a world built on distraction, clarity is rebellion. We live in a time where our attention is constantly being hijacked, whether it's the ping of a new notification, the buzz of an email, or the endless stream of information flooding our minds every single day. It's easy to get caught up in the noise, to drift from one moment to the next, never truly present. But here's the truth. You cannot build anything of real value if your attention is fractured. Every time you're pulled in different directions, you lose a part of yourself. You lose focus. And without focus, nothing substantial gets built. You may think you're getting things done, but in reality, you're just bouncing from one task to another, never truly completing anything or getting any closer to your deeper goals. Focus isn't just a productivity hack. It's a path to becoming who you truly are. Think about it. When you're focused, when your energy is directed in a single direction, you have the power to create. Whether it's building a career, nurturing a relationship, or developing yourself, the ability to concentrate on what truly matters is what allows you to make progress. Focus is the foundation of growth. It's the force that turns potential into action, dreams into reality. When you allow your attention to be fragmented, you're not just losing time, you're losing the opportunity to make something meaningful of your life. Each minute you give to something unimportant is a minute you take away from your greater purpose. But becoming who you truly are requires focus. It requires the ability to direct your energy inwards and not let the external world dictate your actions. You have to choose what matters, and more importantly, you have to choose what doesn't. In a world that demands constant engagement, the ability to resist distraction is one of the most profound acts of self-respect you can perform. It's an act of rebellion against the noise, against the constant barrage of information that tells you what you should care about. True power lies in the ability to say no to everything that doesn't serve you, and yes, with intention, to what does. When your energy is scattered, so is your identity. You've seen it before, the person who juggles too many things at once, always running, always reacting, never fully present in any of it. They're busy, but they're not progressing. They're overwhelmed, but they're not growing. And in the midst of all this, they've lost sight of who they really are. Their focus is too divided, their attention too fragmented, and as a result, their sense of self becomes just as fractured. When you allow yourself to be constantly distracted, you don't just lose time, you lose clarity. And when clarity fades, your purpose fades with it. The most successful people in any field understand this principle. They know that focus is the key to mastery. Whether it's an athlete training for the Olympics or an entrepreneur building a business, the ability to focus on the task at hand is what separates those who succeed from those who struggle. Success doesn't come from working harder or longer. It comes from working smarter, from prioritizing what matters and eliminating everything else. Every minute you spend on something that doesn't align with your purpose is a minute wasted. And when you waste enough minutes, you waste your life. Focus is a discipline. It's a muscle that needs to be trained. It's not something you can turn on and off at will. It requires effort, intention, and practice. In the beginning, it's uncomfortable. Your mind is used to wandering, to jumping from one thought to the next. It takes time to train it to stay on task, to resist the pull of distractions. But with time, it becomes easier. The more you practice focusing, the stronger your ability to concentrate becomes, and as your focus strengthens, so does your sense of self. You become more in tune with who you are and what you want. You start to make decisions based on your values, not on the whims of the world around you. This doesn't mean you have to shut out the world completely or live a life of constant isolation, but it does mean you need to choose what's worthy of your attention. Not everything deserves a piece of your energy. Not every person, not every task, not every thought. You have the right to protect your focus, to guard it like a treasure, because it's your most valuable resource. Once it's gone, everything else falls apart. You can have all the ambition in the world, but if your focus isn't clear, you'll never get anywhere. You can have the best intentions, but if your energy is scattered, those intentions will remain just that: ideas, dreams, plans without action. In a world of endless distractions, protecting your focus is a radical act. It's a statement that you respect your time, your energy, and your purpose. It's a commitment to yourself that you won't let anything stand in the way of your growth. Every moment you stay present is a moment you choose yourself. Every moment you focus on what matters is a moment you create your future. Your time is precious, and once it's gone, you can never get it back. That's why it's so important to spend it wisely. Focus is not just about getting more done, it's about getting the right things done. It's about choosing what truly matters and aligning your actions with that. The world will try to pull you in a million different directions, but you have to remember that you get to decide where your energy goes. You get to decide where your attention goes. You get to decide what deserves your time. And that decision, more than any other, will determine the course of your life. In this modern age, we've been taught that multitasking is the key to success. We've been told that the more we do, the more productive we are. But the reality is, multitasking is a myth. It's a lie that keeps us distracted and ineffective. When you try to do too many things at once, you do none of them well. Your brain wasn't designed to split its attention in multiple directions. You can't give your full energy to something if your mind is pulled in 1,000 different places. Focus isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing and doing it well. It's about saying no to the things that don't serve you and yes to the things that truly matter. Your focus is a reflection of your values. The things you choose to focus on reveal what you truly care about. If you're constantly giving your attention to things that drain you, that's a sign that your values aren't aligned with your actions. But if you focus on what brings you growth, on what fuels your purpose, on what moves you forward, you'll start to see your life take shape. You'll start to see the clarity you've been seeking, and in that clarity, you'll find yourself. So, treat every moment of focus as sacred, protect it, honor it, and above all, use it to create the life you truly want to live. In a world built on distraction, clarity is the ultimate form of resistance. It's the path to your highest self. And every time you choose to focus, you choose growth, purpose, and alignment. You choose to live a life that's true to you, not to the endless demands of the world around you. Keep your focus sharp, and you'll find that everything else begins to fall into place. You don't need to respond to everything. It's tempting, I know. Someone says something that stings, or there's a situation that feels unjust, and your first instinct is to jump in, defend yourself, fix things. But here's the truth. Most of the time, you don't need to engage. Not every insult requires a comeback. Not every problem needs solving. Not every invitation is a summons. And yet, we often treat life like it's a series of emergencies that demand our attention, our energy, and our emotional response. The truth is, you get to decide what deserves your care. You get to decide what takes up space in your mind, in your heart, in your life. Detachment isn't about not caring, it's about choosing where you place your energy. It's not indifference, it's wisdom. It's the realization that not everything in life requires your immediate involvement. Think about it. How often have you gotten emotionally entangled in something that, looking back, didn't truly matter? Maybe it was a trivial argument, an unimportant drama, or a criticism that wasn't worth the weight of your attention. We all get caught up in it at times, but when you reflect, you realize that those moments don't define you, they drain you. And if you keep reacting to every insignificant event, you'll quickly find that you're living a life dictated by everything but your own values. In Stoicism, there's a core principle that teaches us to be in control of our inner state. True peace doesn't come from the world around you. It comes from within, from mastering yourself. And that mastery starts with detachment, the ability to choose when to engage and when to let go. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That's the key to inner power, how you choose to react. When you stop allowing every external event to move you, you begin to control the only thing you truly can: yourself. Self-mastery isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't care. It's about understanding that not everything requires your emotional energy. It's about knowing that some battles are not yours to fight, and some opinions are not yours to defend. We live in a world where it feels like everyone is talking, sharing their opinions, demanding answers, but you don't have to be a part of it. Detachment is the realization that not every thought, not every person, not every situation deserves your attention. The more you detach, the more power you gain. Power over your time, power over your reactions, power over how you move through life. When you stop reacting to everything, you start reigning over your own life. Think about how much energy you've spent reacting to things that weren't worth it. We've all done it. The comments on social media, the family drama, the work gossip, the petty disagreements with friends. How often have these things drained your energy, only to leave you wondering why you allowed yourself to be so affected? When you react out of impulse, out of emotion, you give away your power. You let the situation control you instead of maintaining control over yourself. But when you choose detachment, you don't give your energy away so easily. You take it back. And in doing so, you become more aligned with your true self and your true purpose. In this fast-paced, always connected world, detachment is a radical act. It's the art of saying no to distractions, no to drama, no to the things that don't contribute to your well-being. When you practice detachment, you create space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to reflect. And in that space, you find clarity. The more you detach from the noise around you, the more clearly you can hear your own voice, your own thoughts, your own desires. You can start living in alignment with your values instead of being swept away by the current of external demands. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to prioritize what truly matters. It's the understanding that your emotional well-being is a precious resource, and you shouldn't spend it on things that aren't in alignment with your values. In fact, the more you detach from the things that drain you, the more energy you have to pour into what truly matters, whether that's personal growth, meaningful relationships, or pursuing your passions. The more you detach from the distractions, the more focused and present you become in your own life. The power of detachment lies in your ability to choose what moves you. When you don't react to every external influence, you regain control over your thoughts and actions. You no longer let the world dictate how you feel, how you behave, or how you spend your time. You become the master of your own state. You choose what deserves your attention, what deserves your emotional energy, and what can be let go. When you stop reacting to everything, you create room for what matters. You stop wasting energy on the trivial and you start investing it in what aligns with your purpose. The more you practice detachment, the more you realize that you don't need to engage in every conversation, every argument, or every issue that arises. You become more selective about where you place your focus. And that's where the true power lies. It's the ability to stand firm in your values and not be swayed by the whims of others. It's the ability to keep your peace, your clarity, and your energy intact, no matter what's going on around you. Detachment also gives you the freedom to step back and see things from a broader perspective. When you're constantly in the thick of it, reacting to every situation, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. But when you detach, you allow yourself the space to reflect, to see things as they truly are, not as your emotions would have them appear. This perspective allows you to make decisions from a place of clarity, not from the impulse of emotion. You start acting with intention instead of reacting out of habit. You start reigning when you stop reacting. You start leading your own life when you decide where your attention goes. You start to master yourself when you detach from everything that isn't in alignment with who you are and where you're going. Detachment is the gateway to inner power. It's not about shutting down or turning away from the world. It's about choosing where to invest your energy, where to draw your boundaries, and where to let go. And in that choice, you regain the most precious power of all, the power over your own life. When you stop reacting to everything, you start living with intention, with focus, and with purpose. And that's where true strength begins. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to narrate your growth or justify your choices. In fact, the more you try to explain, the more diluted your impact becomes. Think about it. The oak tree doesn't ask for applause as it rises. It simply grows, steady and strong, without needing validation from anyone. The silence around it only deepens its presence, and that's where the power lies. Silence is not about withholding. It's about allowing your actions to speak louder than words ever could. In today's world, where everyone is shouting to be heard, silence becomes a rare commodity. People are addicted to noise, the constant flow of information, the endless chatter, the need to be constantly visible and validated. But here's the thing. In a world that's so loud, restraint becomes something precious. It stands out. It commands attention, not by force, but by its rarity. People are drawn to what they can't easily get, and silence in a noisy world is as magnetic as it is powerful. The more you hold back, the more your presence fills the room. It's like the air before a storm, still, quiet, and yet pregnant with power. Silence is not weakness, it's control, it's mastery over your own energy. When you speak less, you conserve your power. You don't waste your words, your thoughts, your attention on things that don't matter. And in doing so, you build an aura around you. People begin to wonder, not out of confusion, but out of curiosity. They start to realize that there's depth to you that words can't fully capture. Your actions, the way you carry yourself, the way you engage with the world, those become the language people listen to. When you allow your actions to speak for you, you create a different kind of respect. It's not a respect earned through constant explanation or loud declarations. It's the kind of respect that comes from consistency, from showing up, from doing the work and letting the results speak for themselves. It's easy to talk about what you want to do. It's easy to fill the air with plans, promises, and explanations. But the real impact is in what you actually do, and the more you demonstrate your values through action, the less you'll feel the need to explain them. Carl Jung once said, "The quieter you become, the more you can hear." This is true not just on a physical level, but on a psychological one. The more you learn to embrace silence, the more you hear your own inner voice. You can't hear your true thoughts when you're constantly trying to fill the air with noise. The mind needs space to breathe, to process, to reflect. And when you create that space, when you allow silence to envelop your life, you start to hear things clearly. You begin to understand your own desires, your own motivations, and most importantly, your own worth. Restraint in speech doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means choosing your words, your responses, and your actions with intention. It means understanding that not everything needs to be explained, not every question needs to be answered, and not every situation needs to be discussed at length. Sometimes your presence is enough. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to hold your ground, stay silent, and let the world watch as you work, as you grow, as you move forward. Your silence becomes a statement, one that says, "I don't need to convince you of my worth. I'm showing you through my actions." In a world that thrives on instant gratification and constant validation, restraint becomes an act of defiance. People who are constantly speaking, constantly defending themselves, constantly seeking approval, are often the ones who have the least to say. They seek attention, but never find the depth that comes from quietude. When you remain silent, you detach from the need for validation. You no longer rely on the applause of others to fuel your sense of purpose. Instead, you turn inward and draw strength from within. Your sense of self becomes anchored not in what others think of you, but in who you truly are. Silence builds gravity. It makes you seem larger, more substantial, even when you're not saying a word. People are drawn to those who are confident enough in themselves to be still. In a world that's always moving, always talking, always seeking, those who know how to remain composed, to hold their own energy, become figures of power. And this is not a power that is flaunted or demanded, it is simply felt. It's the power of presence, of being fully anchored in who you are and allowing that presence to speak for you. The more you speak, the more you risk diluting your message. Words, when overused, lose their weight. But when you speak less, when you reserve your energy, your words become more meaningful. Each sentence carries more substance because it's been carefully considered. Each action becomes a reflection of your values because you've put thought into it. When you stop reacting impulsively to every stimulus, you give yourself the space to respond with intention. And this is where your real power lies, not in your ability to fill the air with noise, but in your ability to remain unmoved, to stay centered, and to let your actions do the talking. People will respect you more when they see that you don't need to explain yourself constantly. You don't need to convince them of your value. You don't need to justify your decisions. You simply need to live in alignment with your truth, and that truth will shine through. Your silence gives others the space to observe, to appreciate, and to understand you for who you truly are. Not for who you try to be when you're caught in the rush of trying to prove something. So the next time you're tempted to explain yourself or fill the silence with unnecessary chatter, remember, silence is not the absence of communication. It's the space where true power is created. It's the stillness where your intentions become clear, where your actions speak louder than words, and where your presence becomes enough. In a world that's addicted to noise, your silence is the most profound thing you can offer. Speak less, do more, and let your presence say what your words no longer need to. Let silence build the gravity that pulls people toward you, not because you're asking for attention, but because your presence is undeniable. You are not here to be consumed until you're empty. You are not an endless resource that others can draw from until every ounce of your energy is depleted. The truth is, too many people live as though their value is in how much they give, how much they sacrifice, how much they pour out for others. And yet, when you live your life this way, something profound happens. You start to wither. You begin to lose yourself in the process, to feel like you're giving more than you have. At first, it might feel like a noble pursuit, helping others, being there for the people around you. But eventually, you realize that if you keep giving without replenishing, you're not helping anyone. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You're allowing yourself to become empty, and an empty vessel can't pour anything into others. The problem with this mentality is that it's rooted in the belief that your worth is determined by how much you give. But your worth isn't found in what you can do for others. It's found in who you are. You are not a utility, a service that exists only to meet the needs of others. You are a foundation. A foundation is strong, stable, and built to endure. A foundation doesn't give away pieces of itself until it's hollow. It provides support. It anchors things. It remains steady even when the storm comes. And if you want to be someone others can truly rely on, you must first learn how to be your own foundation. When you prioritize your own growth, your own vision, your own restoration, you don't just become stronger, you become a source of strength for others. You don't need to burn yourself out to be there for people. You don't need to lose yourself in the process. When you take care of yourself, when you stand firm in your own vision, you become someone who can truly be counted on. Not because you've sacrificed everything for others, but because you've made the conscious decision to remain whole. And from that wholeness, you give in ways that nourish, not in ways that drain. Carl Jung once said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." This applies to your sense of self too. The barriers you build against your own growth, whether through self-neglect, people-pleasing, or sacrificing your well-being for others, are the very things that prevent you from being the strong foundation you were meant to be. The more you allow others to take from you without replenishing yourself, the more you build walls around your own growth. You start to shrink, to feel like you're disappearing. But when you focus on building yourself up, when you place your own well-being as a priority, you remove those walls. You let your inner strength flourish. And from that place, you can give freely, but sustainably. Being a foundation isn't about being rigid or unyielding. It's about being steady and reliable, but also flexible enough to adapt to what life throws your way. It's about knowing where to draw the line and where to open up. It's about knowing that you can help others, but only when you've helped yourself first. The moment you begin to treat yourself as a foundation is the moment you stop living for others' expectations and start living for your own purpose. You start making decisions based on what aligns with your vision, not just what others need from you. And that's when you become someone people can truly rely on. Not because you've given them everything, but because you've held your ground and remained steadfast in your own path. The world will always ask for more. People will always need more. More of your time, more of your energy, more of your attention. But you must remember that your time, your energy, and your attention are precious. They are not infinite resources to be depleted. You are not a tool to be used until you break. You are a person with a purpose, with a vision, and with a capacity to grow. And the more you focus on nourishing that growth, the more you'll find that the people around you respect you, not because you've given everything to them, but because you've remained true to yourself. They will see that your foundation is solid, and they will trust you more because of it. Strength doesn't come from constant sacrifice, it comes from balance. It comes from the understanding that you are a whole person, not a half-finished project meant to serve the whims of others. When you give, give from abundance, not from emptiness. And when you set your boundaries, when you protect your energy, you teach others how to do the same. You teach them that self-respect is the foundation of everything else. When you stand firm in your own worth, when you make your needs a priority, you show others that their needs are equally valuable. You create a cycle of mutual respect where no one is drained and everyone has the space to grow. It's easy to get lost in the idea that if you're not constantly giving, you're being selfish. But the truth is, if you keep giving without replenishing yourself, you're not serving anyone, not truly. You're feeding into the cycle of depletion. You're teaching others that their needs come before your own, and in doing so, you teach them that they are more important than you. But when you take care of yourself, when you focus on your own restoration and growth, you become the kind of person who can offer real support. You become the kind of person who inspires others to do the same. So, stop living as if you're here to be consumed. Stop thinking that your value lies in what you can give to others. You are a foundation, not a utility, and a cracked foundation supports no one. When you prioritize your own well-being, when you take the time to nurture yourself and honor your needs, you become a source of strength, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to be of value. You don't have to lose yourself to help others. When you stand strong, when you make yourself a priority, you build something that lasts, something that can support others without ever breaking. That's true strength. That's the foundation you were meant to be. And when you become that foundation, you'll find that your life becomes more purposeful, more aligned, and more fulfilling. There will always be people who won't like your boundaries. They won't like your silence. They won't like your detachment. And while it might sting to realize, that's not your problem. That's their discomfort with your clarity. The more you begin to prioritize your peace, the more you start living in alignment with your own values and goals, the more others may begin to feel threatened by it. You stop seeking approval. You stop molding yourself to fit someone else's idea of who you should be, and suddenly, to them, you've become a challenge, a mirror reflecting the areas in their own lives where they feel incomplete, chaotic, or out of control. And rather than face that discomfort, they'll project it onto you, expecting you to shrink, to accommodate, to soothe. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone that. You don't owe anyone an apology for choosing peace. You don't owe anyone a justification for holding your boundaries, and you certainly don't owe anyone an explanation for your detachment when it's necessary for your well-being. Your peace is your own, and if that bothers someone, it's not your responsibility to fix it. When you're clear about who you are, what you want, and what you stand for, it can make others uncomfortable, especially those who have not yet cultivated their own clarity. But don't let that discomfort make you question your path. Don't let someone else's inability to handle your peace cause you to doubt the power of your boundaries. We live in a world where people often mistake loudness for power, chaos for passion, and constant motion for purpose. But real strength is in stillness. True peace isn't a luxury, it's a discipline. And when you start practicing it, when you start holding space for your own calm amidst a storm of demands, you'll realize just how unsettling that can be for those around you. But that's their journey, not yours. If your calm is upsetting them, it's because they haven't yet learned to find their own peace. It's not a reflection of your actions, it's a reflection of their struggle to confront their own inner turmoil. Your peace doesn't need to apologize. It doesn't need to shrink to accommodate someone else's discomfort. And yet, how many of us have dimmed our own light to avoid rocking the boat, to avoid upsetting someone else's emotional equilibrium? How many times have we quieted our truth, our needs, and our desires just to keep the peace on the outside, only to find ourselves at war internally? When you stop seeking approval from others, you begin to realize how much of your energy has been tied up in trying to appease people who may never be satisfied. You start to realize that your energy is sacred, and you don't have to give it away to those who are only looking to drain it. It's important to remember that when you stop people-pleasing, when you start prioritizing your own peace and your own self-respect, you will inevitably upset some people. That's not an indication that you're doing something wrong. That's a sign that you're doing something right. The people who are still attached to the need for validation, who are still dependent on external approval, will find your self-assurance threatening. They'll want you to slip back into your old patterns of compliance, of bending yourself to fit their desires. But the reality is, you cannot be the source of healing for someone else if you're constantly sacrificing your own well-being. You cannot fill from an empty cup. If you're always catering to someone else's chaos, you'll lose your own peace in the process. When you stop bending to the whims of others, when you stop asking for permission to be at peace, you become a force of nature in your own right. And that's when the resistance comes, when you start to show up for yourself. The people who aren't used to seeing someone stand firm in their self-respect will be the first to push back. But here's the catch. Their discomfort is not your problem. Your calm isn't a crime, and your self-respect isn't an offense. Just because someone reacts negatively to your boundaries doesn't mean you need to shrink them or explain yourself. It's natural for people to push against something that challenges them to change, but that doesn't mean you have to yield. This doesn't mean you don't empathize with others. It doesn't mean you turn your back on those in need, but it does mean that you recognize your own energy is sacred. You don't have to give it away in ways that leave you drained. You don't have to apologize for creating space in your life where you can simply exist without the weight of others' expectations. True love, true service, true relationships come from a place of inner peace. They come from a place where your boundaries are respected, where you are allowed to exist as you are, without needing to explain it, justify it, or shrink it down to make someone else comfortable. When you start embracing your own peace, you start to see the difference between giving out of genuine love and giving out of a need for validation. When you're not operating from a place of need, your relationships transform. They stop being transactional and become authentic. And the more you align with your own values, the more you begin to understand that your peace isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the very thing that keeps you grounded, keeps you clear, and keeps you aligned with who you truly are. So, if your peace makes someone uncomfortable, let it. Let them be upset. You don't have to shrink yourself to make them feel better. The truth is, you're not doing anything wrong. You're simply choosing to stand firm in your self-respect, choosing to build the life you deserve. Your peace isn't a crime. It's the foundation of everything you are and everything you will become. And the more you practice it, the more you'll find that the world around you adjusts. Those who are aligned with your energy will stay, and those who aren't will naturally drift away. And that's exactly how it should be. Let your peace be the boundary that defines your life. Let it be the space where you can thrive, unapologetically. Saying no is one of the most powerful tools you have in your life, yet it's often the hardest thing to say. We've all been there. When someone asks for your time, your help, your energy, and you instinctively say yes to avoid conflict, to smooth things over, or to avoid disappointing someone. But each time you say yes when you really mean no, you abandon yourself just a little more. You start to shrink your own needs, your own desires, just to make someone else feel comfortable. And in the process, you lose touch with your own truth, your own boundaries, and ultimately, your sense of self. But what if saying no could be the key to reclaiming your power? What if every time you said no, clearly, calmly, unapologetically, you were teaching the world that your soul is not up for negotiation? You are not here to be endlessly available to everyone else, while your own well-being and purpose are pushed aside. You don't need to justify yourself, and you certainly don't need to apologize for choosing yourself. No isn't a rejection of others. It's an affirmation of yourself. It's a declaration that your time, your energy, and your peace are not commodities to be traded away. When you start saying no in this way, something shifts. You begin to step into a new kind of freedom, a kind of inner freedom that comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer tolerate. In a world where everyone seems to demand something from you, saying no becomes an act of strength. It's not rude, it's not selfish, it's a necessary boundary. Think about how much of your energy gets spent trying to meet everyone else's needs. How often do you find yourself saying yes to things you don't want to do, simply to avoid tension or discomfort? And when you give in like that, you don't just give away your time, you give away your power. The power to choose what aligns with your values, the power to honor your own commitments, the power to protect your own peace. Saying no is your way of protecting that power. It's your way of taking back control over how your energy is spent. And when you start doing that, you stop being at the mercy of everyone else's expectations. How can you build a life that reflects your true self if you're always giving in to demands that don't align with your core values? The truth is, the more you say yes when you mean no, the more you start to lose touch with your own identity. But when you start saying no unapologetically, you begin to reclaim your authenticity. You create space for your true desires and needs. You start to become who you truly are, unapologetically, authentically, powerfully. But saying no isn't just about rejecting the things that don't serve you. It's about affirming what does. When you say no to the things that drain you, you are saying yes to the things that fuel you. You're saying yes to your own growth, to your own peace, to your own purpose. And when you do that, you build a life that is aligned with your true values, not the expectations of others. You stop living on autopilot, doing things out of obligation, and start living intentionally, making conscious choices that serve your higher purpose. In a sense, every no is an act of self-respect. It's a way of saying, I am worthy of my own time, my own peace, and my own energy. And when you start living from that place of self-respect, the world around you starts to respond differently. People start to respect your boundaries because you've shown them that you respect yourself. You become someone who cannot be taken for granted. You become someone who operates from a place of clarity and power, rather than one of exhaustion and compliance. The more you practice saying no, the easier it becomes to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. The more you say no, the more you begin to realize that it's not a rejection of others. It's an act of love for yourself. It's about drawing the line between what you're willing to give and what you're not. It's about prioritizing yourself without guilt or shame, because the truth is, when you say no, you're teaching others how to treat you. You're teaching them that your time is precious, that your energy is valuable, and that your well-being matters. And when you stop apologizing for your no, you start to live with integrity. You stop compromising who you are for the sake of others' comfort. This doesn't mean you have to be rigid or closed off to the world. It simply means that you are discerning about where and how you invest your energy. You don't have to please everyone, and you don't have to be everything to everyone. You are allowed to prioritize yourself, and in doing so, you become more present, more authentic, and more powerful in your relationships with others. When you stop saying yes to things that deplete you, you become more available for the things that truly matter, things that bring you joy, things that align with your values, things that fuel your purpose. And don't worry about how others might react to your no. It's natural for some people to be disappointed or upset when you set boundaries. But that's their issue, not yours. When you set a boundary, you're not responsible for how others feel about it. You're responsible for protecting your own peace. And anyone who truly cares about you will respect your boundaries. They will understand that your no isn't personal. It's a reflection of your commitment to yourself, your growth, and your well-being. Those who don't respect it may not have a place in your life for much longer, and that's okay. The people who matter will stay, and they will value you more because of your strength to say no. Saying no is one of the most empowering things you can do. It's a way of taking back control over your life and your energy. It's a way of saying, I am worthy of my own peace. And when you start saying no with confidence, without explanation or apology, you begin to step into your true power. The war for your time, your energy, and your peace ends when you stop negotiating with everyone who wants a piece of you. And in its place, you'll find a life of purpose, clarity, and authentic connection. You'll begin to realize that the more you protect your peace, the more you become a force in your own life and the lives of those who respect you. So don't be afraid to say no. It's the beginning of inner freedom and the start of a life that truly belongs to you. Self-prioritization often gets misunderstood. People think it's about becoming cold, detached, or selfish, but in reality, it's about becoming ready. Ready to give, ready to love, ready to lead, not out of desperation, but from a place of strength. There's a misconception that focusing on yourself means isolating from others, but that's not the case. In fact, prioritizing yourself creates a foundation for everything else in your life. When you take care of your own well-being, when you build your clarity and structure, you set yourself up to be the best version of yourself for others. It's not about pushing people away. It's about being able to show up for them when it truly matters. Many people get caught in the trap of giving everything to others, often at the expense of themselves. They think that if they're constantly available, constantly giving, they're doing something virtuous. But what happens when you give, and there's nothing left for you? You burn out. You feel depleted. And eventually, you can't give anything of value to others because you've forgotten how to replenish yourself. That's why self-prioritization isn't selfish. It's a form of preparation. It's about preparing yourself to be present, strong, and effective when the time comes. When you focus on building your inner strength, when you prioritize your health, your peace, and your vision, you make yourself a better partner, friend, colleague, and leader. When you prioritize yourself, you create the space for that growth. It's not about seeking validation from others or trying to please everyone. It's about standing in your own clarity and knowing that you're worthy of your own time and attention. Only then can you give in a way that is healthy, sustainable, and authentic. You can't pour from an empty cup. When you focus on yourself, you're filling that cup so that you have something valuable to offer to the world around you. This isn't about creating distance or cutting people off. It's about understanding that your own well-being is the foundation for everything else in your life. When you stand firm in your own needs, when you protect your energy and your time, you create a space of stability. That's what everything else in your life will depend on. If you're constantly unstable, constantly in turmoil, constantly giving away everything you have, nothing around you will be able to stand firm. Your relationships will suffer, your work will suffer, your dreams will suffer. But when you prioritize yourself, when you put your clarity and structure first, you set the foundation for everything else to thrive. Self-prioritization isn't about building walls or becoming inaccessible. It's about building the strength to show up, to give when it's right, and to love from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. You can't lead, you can't love, you can't create from a place of depletion. But when you take the time to prioritize your own growth, you're not just preparing yourself, you're preparing to give more effectively, more meaningfully, and more powerfully to those around you. When you put yourself first, you create space for others to thrive as well. It's not about making others less important. It's about making yourself strong enough to be there for them when it truly counts. The reality is, When you don't prioritize yourself, you're not truly able to lead or love in the way you think you are. You end up following blindly, hoping that if you just do enough for others, they'll see your worth. But that's not leadership. That's desperation. True leadership comes from a place of confidence and self-respect. It comes from knowing that you have something valuable to offer, not because you've sacrificed yourself, but because you've built yourself up. The same goes for love. When you love from a place of desperation, when you give everything of yourself to another person, you lose yourself in the process. But when you love from strength, when you're grounded in who you are, when your own needs are met, you give love in a way that's real, that's lasting, and that doesn't drain you. We're often taught that to be a good partner, a good friend, or a good leader, we must constantly give. But the truth is, giving without first taking care of yourself doesn't make you noble. It makes you fragile. You're building a house on a cracked foundation, and eventually that foundation will crumble. But when you prioritize yourself, when you protect your peace, your energy, your growth, you create something that lasts. You build strength, you build resilience, you build the ability to give from a place of stability, not from a place of exhaustion. This isn't about ego, it's about equilibrium. It's about finding balance in your life, between your needs and the needs of others, between your aspirations and your responsibilities. When you prioritize yourself, you're not saying that others don't matter. You're saying that you matter too. You're saying that you deserve the space to grow, to restore, and to thrive. And when you give yourself that space, you become someone who others can rely on, not because you've sacrificed yourself for them, but because you've built yourself up into someone strong, clear, and centered. Self-prioritization is the foundation of everything else in your life. It's the anchor that keeps you grounded, the fuel that keeps you going, and the clarity that guides your decisions. When you make yourself a priority, you're not just preparing yourself for the challenges ahead, you're preparing to lead, to love, and to build the life you've always wanted. And in doing so, you create a life that's not just meaningful for you, but meaningful for those around you as well. So, the next time you feel guilty for saying no, or the next time you question whether you should put yourself first, remember this: you are not here to be consumed until you're empty. You are here to build a foundation, one that is strong, steady, and capable of supporting everything you want to create in your life. Prioritize yourself and watch everything around you begin to align. Your strength, your peace, and your growth are your own responsibility. When you prioritize yourself, you lay the foundation for everything else in your life to thrive. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you that you're not worth the effort. Stand strong in who you are, and everything else will follow. Thank you for being part of Stoic Journal. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to explore more by watching one of the suggested videos on the screen. Keep growing, keep reflecting, and remember, your clarity is your power.